Henry Middleton of South Carolina was the second president of the United Colonies Continental Congress. His presidential tenure, however, was quite brief, being elected on October 22nd and ending with the dissolution of the First Continental Congress on October 26, 1774. Henry Middleton was born in South Carolina in 1717 to Arthur Middleton and Susan Amory on their Oaks Plantation. Although one of 8 children, only 2 other siblings survived into adulthood, William, born in 1710, and Thomas, born in 1719. Arthur Middleton, Henry's father, was a wealthy planter who had served in numerous public offices, and in May 1725 he became the acting colonial governor of South Carolina. Henry, like his brothers, was sent to London for his education. In 1737, Arthur Middleton died at the age of 56, and since his oldest son, William, went to England to take possession of Crowfield, the family estate in Suffolk, the Oaks was inherited by Henry. The wealth of his estate in 1738 totaled 4,840 acres in several South Carolina counties. In 1739, he began his courtship of Mary Williams, the daughter of John Williams, and they were married in the summer of 1741. John Williams, who had no son, willed his vast Ashley River estate to his daughter under a deed restriction that ownership would pass to Mary's oldest son at the age of 21. Henry took over the estate and added 2 extensions on either side of the Williams mansion. With the help of an English landscape artist and a Dutch gardener, Henry directed extensive landscaping, creating a terraced lawn, lakes, and well-manicured gardens which led down to the Ashley River. The first camellias introduced into America were planted at the now historic landmark estate, which bears the name Middleton Place. In 1742, Henry was elected to the 13th Royal Assembly of the South Carolina Commons House, and on the 24th of June in that same year, Mary gave birth to Arthur, their first child of 12, who was named after his grandfather. Arthur was initially educated at home by a private English tutor, and a very young John Rutledge often came over to Middleton Place to share in Arthur's academic lessons. In 1747, Henry was elected Speaker to the Commons House, serving 5 terms as the highest elected official in South Carolina. During this period, he also served as a Justice of the Peace, and in 1755 declined a 6th term as Speaker. Also in 1755, he was appointed King's Commissioner of Indian Affairs, which proved to be an important office due to the complexities brought on by the 7 Years' War. Reported to be steady under pressure and quite courageous, Henry gained colonial notoriety during the 1760-61 war with the Cherokees, which was a notable chapter of the French and Indian War. At this time in South Carolina, the ultimate authority in colonial society hinged on the appointment power of the governors with the advice and consent of the upper houses and councils of the colonial legislature. The members of these upper houses were chosen from the wealthiest and most influential families. They were nominated by the governors and appointed by King George. This resulted in a handful of families in each colony controlling the upper houses, the Supreme Courts, the county courts, sheriffs, justices of the peace, militia officers, and numerous minor office holders. This aristocracy reached down into the smallest of colonial affairs and was also influential in the elections of the lower house delegates to the colonial legislatures. In 1755, Henry Middleton was appointed to the King's Provincial Council, South Carolina's upper house, by King George II. He would serve in this council until his resignation in September 1770. On January 9, 1761, at the age of 40, Mary Middleton passed away and was interred at Middleton Place. The following year, Henry married Maria Henrietta Bull, daughter of the former Lieutenant Governor William Bull Sr., who was the sister of the then current acting governor, William Bull II. In 1763, Henry's eldest son, Arthur, returned home from his English education and married Mary Izard. The couple moved into Middleton Place, which was deeded to Arthur as per his grandfather's wishes. After briefly residing at 69 Broad Street in Charleston, Henry and Maria relocated to a new plantation they named a Retreat, 7 miles from Charleston. In 1765, Middleton, as a member of the Governor's Council, found himself caught up in a citizen outrage over Parliament's passage of the Stamp Act. Christopher Gadsden, the Sam Adams of the South, mobilized the South Carolina Sons of Liberty branch, and they were successful in getting South Carolina stamp agents to resign. This resulted in Lieutenant Governor Bull, Henry's brother-in-law, to close down Charleston's important shipping ports. The South Carolina Commons petitioned the lieutenant governor to set aside the stamps and reopen the port, but Bull held firm. Two members of the King's Council did not vote with the lieutenant governor, and one of them was Henry Middleton. The crisis, however, was averted with Parliament's repeal of the Stamp Act. Due to the Stamp Act, organizations like the Sons of Liberty expanded throughout the colonies, and they were controlled by a new patriot faction of colonists that were made up of tenant farmers, artisans, mechanics, small shopkeepers, and unfranchised citizens of the larger colonial cities. They began to challenge the colonial oligarchy, seeing them as merely extensions of the king and parliament, because men like Bull and Middleton, whether they wanted independence or not, sought to preserve the aristocratic order. Throughout the colonies, most of the oligarchy opposed Parliament's taxation and policies, but their powerful positions in the colonial government depended on British authority. In short, men like Middleton had achieved self-government and simply wanted to rule their colony without British intervention. During his service on the King's Council, Henry began to side with the House of Commons over the lieutenant governor on numerous issues. On September 14, 1770, Henry Middleton resigned from the council and focused on his family and land holdings, which now exceeded 50,000 acres on 20 plantations, which were maintained by over 800 slaves. The following year, Maria Middleton died at the age of 49. In 1773, his daughter Sally married Charles Chatsworth Pinckney, a future delegate to the Constitutional Convention, while in 1774 Hess married physician Charles Drayton, and Henrietta married Edward Rutledge, who had served with Henry in the Continental Congress, and on August 2, 1776, signed a Declaration of Independence. On July 6, 7th, and 8th of 1774, a general meeting of the inhabitants of South Carolina was held at Charlestown, and they elected Henry Middleton, John Rutledge, Christopher Gadsden, Thomas Lynch, and Edward Rutledge deputies to the First Continental Congress. According to John Adams, Henry Middleton arrived in Philadelphia on September 2nd and dined at the home of Thomas Mifflin. Later that evening, he met with Peyton Randolph and Richard Henry Lee at the City Tavern. All would become presidents. On September 5, 1774, the Continental Congress convened at Carpenter's Hall and elected Peyton Randolph of Virginia president and Charles Thompson of Pennsylvania secretary. The Continental Congress in 1774 was evenly balanced between the progressive patriots and conservative oligarchy factions. The progressives, however, were growing stronger, and prudent conservatives like Middleton, Randolph, Jay, and the Rutledges found themselves in a position where they had to support causes that they disagreed with to retain their posts, powers, and personal assets in the new political order that was sweeping the colonies. In the deliberations in Congress, Henry held his cards close to the vest, but on important economic issues like exempting South Carolina rice from the list of prohibited trade commodities, he spoke often, siding with the more animated Lynch and Rutledge brothers. Henry did side with the progressives, adopting a colonial Bill of Rights, and signed the Articles of Association landmark resolution that boycotted British and Irish trade in North America. He and the other conservatives, however, went too far on September 17th, with Congress's endorsement of the Suffolk Resolves that reached London ahead of all the other measures. British Colonial Secretary of State, Lord Dartmouth, upon reading the resolve, said, "The people are generally ripe for the execution of any plan the Congress advises, should it be war itself." King George, in a fit of anger, said, "The die is cast." On October 21st, Peyton Randolph resigned the presidency to preside over a meeting of the House of Burgesses, and Henry Middleton was chosen president to conclude the business of the First Continental Congress. There is some speculation that John Adams orchestrated the election of Henry Middleton to block Joseph Galloway's Plan of Union. On Monday, October 24th, two committees brought their address to the King and to the people of Quebec before Congress, and debate ensued, with the recommended changes being sent back to the prospective committees for fine-tuning. The following day, Congress approved the address to the King and ordered that delegates Lee and Jay prepare a cover letter to the agents representing the colonies in London. On October 26th, Congress dissolved itself after approving the letter to the London agents and the address to the people of Quebec, which were signed by Henry Middleton as president. The South Carolina delegation arrived in Charleston on November 6, 1774, and in January a new Colonial Common House convened to review the Continental Congress resolutions. Henry, along with his two sons, were elected to the new legislature, and on January 11, 1775, he was appointed delegate to the Second Continental Congress. On May 10, 1775, the Second Continental Congress assembled at the Philadelphia State House and elected Peyton Randolph president. But on May 24th, Peyton resigned and the delegates turned to Henry, but he declined to serve a second term as president. In short, Henry Middleton turned down on what would become the most important Continental Congress presidency in United States history. Middleton did accept the office as a member of the Safety Council and voted for landmark measures like establishing the Continental Army, appointing George Washington as commander-in-chief, commissioning 8 brigadier generals, creating the United Colonies dollar currency, passing the United Colonies of North America's Declaration for setting forth the causes and necessities of their taking up arms against Great Britain, appointing Benjamin Franklin as the Postmaster General, establishing military hospitals, appointing 2 joint treasurers of the United Colonies of North America, establishing the Marines, and adopting the rules for the regulations of the Navy of the United Colonies of North America. On September 15, 1775, Governor Lord William Campbell dissolved the South Carolina Commons from a British man of war as the royal government collapsed. Henry and John Rutledge left the Continental Congress on November 5, 1775 by land to avoid capture by the British. Henry married Lady Mary Mackenzie Crayon in January of 1776. On February 11th, Henry and his son were elected to sit on a committee to form the new government of South Carolina. On the 15th, he declined serving another term in the Continental Congress, but his son Arthur was elected in his place, who went on to sign the Declaration of Independence. Henry does accept an election to the upper house of the new state government, but declines overtures to serve as its president. In December of 1778, Savannah fell to the British, and as they marched northward, numerous plantations were captured and destroyed. Middleton Place and the Oaks were looted and vandalized by the British troops. 5 months later, after he moved the family to a plantation 120 miles north of the Oaks, the British began the bombardment of Charleston. A month later, General Benjamin Lincoln surrendered the city, and 5,500 Continental and militia soldiers became prisoners. Sir Henry Clinton at first declared the inhabitants of Charleston could remain neutral, but after Henry and his family returned to Charleston, the general reversed this position and declared that all residents must take a loyalty oath or face imprisonment. Henry Middleton tried to avert the oath by sending a carefully worded letter, but the British refused the alternative, and Middleton, unlike his son and many other patriots, took the oath of allegiance to the British Crown, which was reported internationally by newspapers and magazines. Former President Henry Lawrence, who was imprisoned in the Tower of London, reacted to the news stating, "Mr. Middleton, although he has been President of Congress, loves his rice fields." Arthur Middleton and Ed Rutledge were imprisoned in the Exchange Building in Charleston, and then, still refusing to take the oath, were sent to a fortress prison in St. Augustine. That year, Middleton lost 3 grandchildren, and his son-in-law, Charles Pinckney, was kept under house arrest at the Snee Farm. After the defeat of Cornwallis and Yorktown in the preliminary peace treaty of Paris, the British, on December 14, 1782, evacuated Charleston. Patriots who were jailed for not taking the oath of allegiance initiated measures against those that had, which included heavy fines and confiscating of real property. Henry's name escaped all the retribution lists. In 1783, the South Carolina tax records indicated that Henry Middleton held 27,871 acres of land and claimed 259 slaves. On June 13, 1784, a month after his daughter Sally's death, Henry quietly died at his Charleston home at the age of 67. He was laid to rest in the St. James Goose Creek churchyard behind the chancel.
And we can't find his grave. It's not marked anywhere.
Arthur Middleton died 2.5 years later, and he was interred in Middleton Place next to his mother. His eldest son, also named Henry Middleton, carried on the family's legacy of public service as a U.S. Congressman, U.S. Ambassador to Russia, and Governor of South Carolina. This is Stanley Yavna Close on the Congressional Evolution of the United States of America, for President Henry Middleton.